The 535th edition of the Four Corners podcast starts right now.
This is the Four Corners podcast.
And that could make a difference. Lawson at the buzzer. Got it! Maybe not. Ty Lawson wins it at the buzzer.
Deep three. And Green rips down the rebound in traffic. 4-on-1.
What a great job. What a terrific job in transition. I mean, you couldn't plan that any better as a coach.
Gets the roll. Here we go. Page has it. Carolina down one. 84-83. Page into the front court with 4 seconds. Page to the rim. Got it! He got it! 9/10 of a second to go. Inbounds. Washington gets it to Warren. His full court shot. No good. Marcus Page baby. Does it for the Tar Heels. Carolina wins it.
Don't force it if you're Goss.
Comes in.
Blocked by Meeks. Buried up ahead to Jackson. And he tucks it down for the 5-point lead.
Matthews off the mark, and this year the confetti is going to fall for North Carolina. They're not going to be denied this time. Inside 30 overall. Love, top of the key. Oh! Big time delivery.
Here are your hosts, Josh Marlowe and Anthony Pagnotta.
Hello and welcome into another live edition of the Four Corners podcast. We are powered by Carolina Electrical Services. Josh and Anthony hanging out with you live on a Monday night, the first night of the off season in full swing, with the transfer portal officially open, and Carolina has already gotten busy contacting transfer. We'll talk about that a little bit later in the show. Over 700 players have already entered the portal, setting a new record, which was set last year, I think 291 on the first day of the portal, which just tells you how much player movement we expect to see this offseason in college basketball. What we're going to do tonight is we're going to go through the roster of all the players that have eligibility left and talk about whether we think they'll stay with the program or exit the program via the portal or entering the NBA draft. I wrote a long piece article about this on HeelToughBlog.com. Got a lot of interaction, got a lot of feedback on that. We decided to make a podcast edition out of said article, so that's what we're going to do here tonight. Before we do that, though, we start every edition of the pod, as we always do, with the pod thought of the day. We go to Herbert Prochnow for today's pod thought. That thought is, quote, "The trouble with opportunity is that it always comes disguised as hard work." I think, there's no doubt about it that Carolina has an opportunity to set itself up for more success, better success next season. I think the beauty of, going home early from the tournament is you do get an early head start on the portal. You do get an early head start on trying to recreate a better roster from top to bottom, bring in the players that you want, the players that you need to win at the level that we expect to win at here at Carolina. But make no mistake about it, this is not going to be easy. This is not going to be something that is going to come without, Hubert Davis, Jim Tanner, the recruiting staff, the front office, putting in the legwork that's going to be necessary. Carolina has its work cut out for them as they look to try to revamp and put together a roster that could compete at a much higher level than what we saw this past year, going 1-13 in games against quad one opponents and going home in the first round of the NCAA tournament. So I think the good news is that, Hubert's in a better position this year to attack the portal because he's got guys around him to help him navigate the contracts, help identify the best talent. But it's still not going to be as easy as you might think it's going to be. And hopefully this staff, both the basketball staff and the front office staff, they're ready to go to work. They're ready to roll their sleeves up and get this program back to where we expect it to be, because Not sitting here talking about a game later this week is not where we thought we were going to be back in October with a team that was preseason ranked inside the top 10. Let's go ahead and get right to what we're here to do tonight, which is comb through this roster and talk about guys, whether we expect them to be back with the program next year or move on via the portal or entering the NBA draft. We'll start with Elliot Cadeau. I think a guy that, his status, I think, is as in flux as anybody that's on the roster right now. Cadeau played 37 games this past season for Carolina, played about 28 minutes, averaged 9.4 points, 2.9 rebounds, 6.2 assists, but it did have 3.1 turnovers per game average while shooting 45% from the field, 67% from the foul line, but just 34% from three. You go back to the preseason, and we played audio of Hubert Davis saying that Elliot Cadeau was going to be so improved that we would not recognize him from the player that he was from his freshman season. That guy never showed up. That guy never was on the basketball court for Carolina, maybe outside the first 3 games where he was averaging 17 and 8. But you look at the competition, those numbers were inflated. I think this was a guy, as much as anybody, that when this team went to Hawaii for the road game against Hawaii and then the Maui Invitational, when the things didn't go their way, his confidence was, as shattered as much as anybody. And he never regained the form we saw the first 3 games of the year. With that being said, when Carolina made their late season surge to make the tournament, he was a big part of that. Having big games, whether it was in the assist total where he had, 12 assists a handful of times, or there were some games where he was helping Carolina by putting the ball in the basket. And I think it really just brings to a head where I think the situation around Cadeau, it's not as toxic as it was with Caleb Love, but there's toxicity that exists there. Like this is a fan base that I think has a love-hate relationship with the sophomore point guard, a guy that reclassified to join the program early a year ago. And, I'll give my thoughts on what I think ultimately happens, but I think his status, as much as any other guy on the roster, is as in flux as we sit here the first night of the portal officially open.
Yeah, and I mean, everything that we're kind of hearing tonight would suggest that it's as in flux as it could possibly be. It's I don't know how to put it, because I don't think it's as bad as Caleb Love's situation, because it really just depends on what you believe with the Caleb Love situation. If you believe that what the rumors were around it are true, then it was as toxic as it gets. I don't think there's anything to that extent that we're dealing with Elliot Cadeau, but it's more just, it's polarizing. You either really like the potential that Cadeau has, you still think that there's something there to his game, and you believe that what you saw towards the end of the season where he started sharing the ball a little bit better, cutting down on the turnovers, you believe that that is the player that ultimately is going to show up more times than not. If you believe that, then okay, you think that he's a guy that should be on this roster moving forward. Then there's the other people that believe that the guy that we saw through the middle portion of the season is the guy that's probably going to continue to show up. He didn't take the leap that we see most sophomore guards take in a Carolina system. And granted, it's a little bit different because now you've got Hubert Davis here, not Roy Williams, not Dean Smith, where we got so accustomed to that for all those years where Carolina's guys were taking that huge leap as sophomores, especially under Roy Williams. And so I do think that there is a reason to be concerned that he didn't take that leap this year, that the scoring, never really evened itself out. You thought as the year went along, there would be some more consistency there. Maybe eventually he would become a guy that could be counted on to score on that, on the offensive end of the floor pretty consistently. That never really happened. So, it's tough, because I think there are some really good characteristics to his game. But I think that there's plenty of reasons why I understand why Carolina should potentially look elsewhere. And this, to me, comes down to the money. If he wants a lot of money, if he wants to be guaranteed that he's going to be a starting point guard, then I don't know if I can give that to him. I think there are guys that are going to enter this transfer portal at the point guard position that are going to be better players than him. I think Carolina needs a dominant scoring guard, and I think that's someone that needs to be at that one guard spot this year, especially if you're in the camp of keeping Seth Trimble around. So that's why this makes this probably one of the most confusing ones to go through. But ultimately, I mean, it's one of the most complex scenarios that I think we've seen so far during the transfer portal era.
Yeah, I think he's a great reflection of Carolina's head coach. Do you believe in the good of Elliot Cadeau, and that's who he is, or do you believe more in the not so good, where he's turnover prone, he can't make consistent jump shots, he's a liability defensively? We're trying to figure out, is Hubert Davis the guy that led Carolina to the brink of a national championship and won a regular season title and was a 1 seed? Or is he a guy that in 2 seasons where he was preseason top 10, when missed the tournament in 1 year, was out in the first round the second year with 14 losses? The thing with Cadeau is, I think if you want him back, you've got to surround him with bigger talent. Like, you got to have more size with him, because he's just too small to be a consistent difference maker with how small Carolina was this past year. And I think when you had more size on the wing and the perimeter with Cormac, with Ingram, and you had a legitimate big down low in Armando Bacot, like, I think if he had those guys around him this year, I think you see a much better version of him. But he didn't have that. Yeah, he had R.J. Davis back in the fold, but then Drake Powell didn't settle into his role until late in the season at the 3. Same thing with Jalen Withers, and same thing with Van Allen Lubin. Like, he was having to deal with interchanging parts both on the perimeter with him, and it took Lubin just too long to really establish himself down low. And once he did establish himself, there was chemistry there. They developed a nice pick and roll game whenever Lubin could handle those pocket passes that Trimble or that Cadeau was able to throw his way. So I'll say this: when I wrote the article, I predicted he would be back. I thought Carolina was going to value him, just because there is talent there, there is potential there. I wrote that article over 24 hours ago. I've gotten 3 different DMs, not from official sources, but people that are connected to the program, basically laying out that more than likely he's not coming back. And it's not a money issue. That this is more of just a philosophical difference where Carolina's moving on because it's what's best for Carolina, and it's probably what's best for Elliot Cadeau. So at the time of the article, I thought he'd be back. I'm open to him being back, but now with the portal officially open, these end of season meetings haven't already taken place. The expectation is for him to not be back in Chapel Hill for 2025, 2026.
Yeah. I've heard similar stuff. And I would be stunned at this point if he is not entering the portal. Now, as Chris Johnson says, he's in the portal. No, he is not. That is not true. So that until it gets officially reported and until you actually see him post the screenshot on his Twitter or he confirms it himself, he is not officially in the portal. His name is not out there. People are not able to contact him. We are not breaking news that all of a sudden, no, now it's official. I'm with you. I don't think he's coming back. I think that was something that was pretty well known about mid-season, that Carolina, the way things were trending, they probably weren't going to be bringing him back. I think maybe towards the end of the year, he might have had them questioning whether or not that would be the right decision. But I think ultimately what's probably going to happen is they are going to both come to the conclusion that they need to part ways and it's best for both sides. That's where, if you want to compare it to the Caleb Love situation, I believe that's where it's going to be similar, is that you're going to see both sides really come to the same conclusion. And at the end of the day, I mean, honestly, if it is the case, and, we'll come back on here. I mean, if it gets confirmed tomorrow, then we'll be back on here talking about it. I mean, hell, if it gets confirmed later in this podcast, we'll talk about it. I think it sucks, honestly, like the whole situation. Do I think ultimately it would probably be the right thing for Carolina? Yeah, probably, because they need to rebuild this roster. But it sucks from the fact that I really wish that it had worked out, because the guy that he was in high school was a guy that could really become a Carolina legend because of the way he was able to pass the basketball. He was a much better scorer of the basketball. I think one of the worst things that happened to him, honestly, was getting reclassed. Yep. I think that just it sped up his timeline way too quickly. And we've seen this before, more so with guys going to the NBA, and it's speeding up their timeline. I think if he stays in the class that he was supposed to be in and he had joined the team this year, I do wonder how much different of a player he ultimately is. But I mean, look, I'm not criticizing the family for making that decision or whatever. I think at the time, especially with how much ball he had played for Team Sweden and everything like that, he had played on an international stage. It made sense why you wanted to go ahead and do it. But once you saw, I mean, especially, the confidence issues that he just had at times, that's what really killed me. Because I thought if this dude could become confident in himself, he was going to be a really good player. We just ultimately never saw that side of him.
Yeah, and I think it's important to remember or to stress, reclassifying hurt him individually, helped Carolina collectively a year ago. Like, he was a big part of the success of that team. Mm-hmm. Like, with the way that roster was constructed around him, Carolina needed him, which is why I think they kind of pushed for that reclassification. But what it did was it did speed up his timeline. And I think what it did was it just sent the hype way too high. And the expectations got way too high for a guy that, should not have been in college until this past season. So I hate it too, because, in this day and age where guys could have quit after what happened a year ago, where he effectively was benched in the NCAA tournament, lost to Alabama, he said, no, I'm going to use this as motivation. I want to improve my game to a point where that doesn't happen to me again. And what's very odd, what's very interesting is you look at the comebacks that Carolina staged, in the loss to Ole Miss, the loss to Duke. He was at the forefront of those. Like, you see the potential there. Yep. You see that he's capable of making, 3-point shots whenever he's got a chance to set his feet. He was finishing at a high rate at the rim despite all that size that Duke has. It was breaking guys down off the dribble. But it's got to be consistent. And I think that's the one thing he has struggled with. And, when you don't play consistently at a high level here, there comes the criticism. There comes the backlash. There comes the negative noise. And so ultimately, I want him back. I'd value him back. I do think Elliot Cadeau will move on and be somewhere else going into next year. Let's go to another guy in the backcourt. We'll take a look next at Seth Trimble. Trimble was a big part of the success this team enjoyed this year. Played in 34 games. He played, over 20, almost 29 minutes per contest. Third on the team in scoring at 11.6 points. Second on the team in rebounding, 5 rebounds per game. Did average over 1 assist, but did shoot just 43% from the field and 27% from 3. So was not the efficient guy that he was a year ago. And Jay Billis told us on every broadcast he needs to shoot the ball more. Trimble's offensive game, I think, took a step back in terms of his jump shot. But I thought this guy grew in so many ways as a leader. He's the guy that you point to and say, that's the extension of Hubert Davis on the floor. That's the guy that plays with the energy, the passion that this team lacked for the majority of the season. And then you look at just how visibly emotional he was at the end of the year when he was up there at that podium talking about the season coming to an end, what he learned from R.J. Davis. You could tell this means something to him. This isn't just, I'm here to play basketball. Like, I think this guy's here to win. I think this guy's here to leave a legacy. And he was one of two players that after the season, when he was addressing the media, both at the podium and then, in the locker room, said it. I want to be back. I want to return for my senior season. But this is where college athletics have changed. He decided that NIL is going to play a role. It's going to play a factor. And so, I think it's a good thing to hear that he wants to be here and he wants to be back and be a part of restoring the program to where it was just last season. But with that, there's going to come, you would imagine, a hefty price tag because he was sought after last year when he entered the portal. He came back. Those same schools, i.e. a Marquette, would be interested in him again. And so if Carolina wants to ensure that Trimble's back in Chapel Hill, they've got to be ready to pay him a significant NIL compensation.
Yeah, and that's not shocking at all. I mean, the way that he, became a leader on this team towards the end of the year, still think he kind of needs to take a step, be even a little more vocal than he was down the stretch of the season. But this is a guy that I think grew into a fan favorite and someone that, you could just tell was bringing the effort on both ends of the floor every single time that he stepped out there. It's the reason why I want him back. Now, the thing is that, and we'll talk about Isaac McNeely a little bit later, but if he's the guy that Carolina's picking up, then you start to look around and say, okay, where in the starting lineup can you actually play Seth Trimble? Because are you going with a smaller lineup like you did for most of this year, where you're going to have either McNeely playing at the 3 and run that 3-guard system? He is a little bit, still a little bit smaller than you're going to have if you've got a guy like Drake Powell in there, or God forbid you go with the incredibly big lineup with Caleb Wilson as the 3, go from a 6'9" guy down to, a shorter group where you're running 3 guards again. So I think that's the thing that Carolina's got to figure out, and ultimately what they want to do, because this roster has to get turned over. You can't just choose to bring all these guys back and run it back. And so I think they've got to figure out, do they believe that Seth Trimble is a guy that his offensive game has the ability to take another step? Does he have the ability to become a better shooter from the outside? Does he have the ability to become just a better jump shooter in general? If he does, if they believe that, then I think you've got to bring him back, because he's a guy that guys on this roster look up to. He gives you a steadying presence. And we've seen, there are, some advantages to having him in your backcourt and playing him an extensive amount of minutes. One, you're a much better defensive team, even though he had his ups and downs defensively at times this year. You saw towards the end of the season, he really got in a groove there. And he is a guy that attacks the basket the way that you want. I mean, there is no doubt about that. That's the strength of his game. He's able to get to the foul line about as well as anybody in college basketball. So I think that Carolina, they should want him back. But I am interested with them reaching out to McNeely, what that ultimately means, because I believe that in order to get him back, you're going to have to make him a starter. And I just can't see. I know coming out of high school, he was a point guard. He played a lot of 1 guard in high school, controlled a lot of the pace and everything like that, and did a good job of it. I don't think that's necessarily his game, as we've seen as we've gotten to this level. And so I don't know if they would be able to bring him back if they were to land a guy like McNeely.
Yeah, I mean, I think it's important to point out a few things. I got into this conversation with Myron Goodman this morning, and he brought up those same concerns. Well, there's a whole summer for him to improve his game. And I think if there's a guy that's going to be in the gym, that's going to be working as around the clock as he can to become the best basketball player he can become, I think Seth Trimble is that guy. Mm-hmm. I don't necessarily think starting is the most important thing, because he's going to play starter-like minutes. Like, he didn't start down the stretch, but was playing 25 minutes a night. Was on the floor when Carolina was in crunch time. So if that's something that he values, and maybe that's something that has to be worked out and massaged, I don't think Carolina would be against paying him what he wants to get paid. But what also had the mindset of, okay, you're best suited to come off the bench, but play 25, 28 minutes a night. The most important reason why you want him back more than anything is your culture. Like, as much as this roster needs to be turned over, Hubert Davis needs to have somebody that he has coached that he can point to and say, that's the example setter. You follow him. Because you're losing that in RJ Davis. Jalen Withers gone. Ty Cloud was only here for a year. You can't just – I mean, look, maybe you could do what John Calipari did, which is bring in a whole crop of new guys. And it all comes together and you make it to the second weekend of the tournament. It's a real hard thing to do. Like Rick Pitino, that's what he's going to do at St. John's. He's not even recruiting high school players anymore. Rick Pitino and at St. John's every year will recruit the transfer portal, put together its roster. It's a real hard thing. To me, it's a real hard way to win. And for a coach that is entering what's going to more than likely be a make or break season, I don't know if he wants to go out here and bring in 8 new dudes to join the freshmen and see how that thing's going to come together. So I think more than anything is from a culture perspective, you want Seth Trimble back. This is a guy who, when he returned from the portal last year, said, my heart and soul belongs in Chapel Hill. He played that way. And Carolina's going to need that guy on its roster next season. So I expect he'll be back. I think Carolina is going to value him. They're going to prioritize him. I think the McNeely stuff, and we'll get to that a little bit later, but I'll just give you this initial comment, is just the first indicator that Carolina is going to recruit size as much as anything they recruit this year in the portal. Like, yeah, you're going to recruit ability. You're going to recruit, flexibility. Carolina is going to be bigger because they have to be bigger. Because you look at these games where they got beat in these quad one games, it was mainly them being overwhelmed by size and length and physicality. Hubert Davis, Jim Tanner, I think they're going to be on a mission to make sure that does not happen again going into 2025, 2026. Let's now move to the front court. Ven-Allen Lubin, a guy that I think in mid-January, if he were to have declared today, we would not have really cared. We would have been indifferent on Ven-Allen Lubin because was just never the guy that we thought he was going to be entering when he arrived from Vanderbilt. And then the back half of the season showed up. And Ven-Allen Lubin became really as indispensable a player as Carolina had outside of RJ Davis. Like, you look at the gap between him and Jalen Washington. When he got in foul trouble in the loss to Ole Miss, that was a big reason why. Because now Carolina, despite him being 6'9", lost his most physical presence inside. You're talking about a guy that also recorded 3 straight double-doubles at the ACC tournament. Like, came on strong, became a guy that could score at the rim, could grab rebounds, and very quietly became a rim protector for Carolina down the stretch of the season as well. But like Trimble, he cited in the post-game stuff after the loss to Ole Miss, I want to be back, but NIL is going to play a role. You look at what Carolina's front court is right now. There's not a quote-unquote big man that's entering the program next year out of the high school ranks. They're going to be very active trying to land at least one big, maybe two this offseason in the transfer portal. What do you think the future holds for Ven-Allen Lubin, a guy who I think maybe changed his fortune and his outcome as much as anybody the last 10 to 15 games of the season?
Yeah, I think it definitely makes for a conversation here that I think before we weren't going to be able to have. It's so tough, man. This is the most complex one to me because you have to get more size. And if you're getting more size, you're going out and you're getting a talented player. You're not getting someone that's coming in here and not expecting to start. You're going and getting someone that's a 7-footer. If they're smaller than that, they're definitely above 6'10". And you're finding someone that's going to be playing 30 minutes a game. And so then the question becomes, if you find that guy, what do you do with Ven-Allen Lubin Because as we've seen with Lubin, the thing that you need more than anything for him is playing time. The more playing time that he gets, the more effective he is. That's where he can start to add up the rebounds. That's really, a lot of the games down the stretch of the season where he would settle into a lot of games. He would score a lot late in games. That was really where he got a lot of his points. That would be where he'd pull down some key offensive rebounds for you. So it's tough because I see clearly the way that he played down the stretch of the season. I would want him back. My immediate reaction when you would say, do you want him back? Yes or no, would be yes. But when you think about it, where are you going to play him? I think this also depends on what Drake Powell ends up doing. If Drake Powell chooses to come back, then he's your 3. You're going to play Caleb Wilson at the 4. And with how talented he is, you should be expecting to start him. And then you're going to play Van Allen Lubin at the 5. You're going to play him 30 so minutes at the 5. I don't know if that's the recipe for success, because I think that Carolina needs to get bigger. So, this is what's so confusing, because if Drake Powell doesn't come back, then I think there's definitely an avenue that you can start him, because Caleb Wilson has the skill set, I think, to play as a 3 in your system. He can play as a wing player and succeed. And then you could basically do kind of what Florida's doing right now. I think, their guys are a little bigger. I think they have a couple of guys that are over 6'10", down low, but I do believe that you could run basically 2 bigs. You could have Van Allen Lubin play the 4, as long as the guy that you bring in at the 5 does have the ability to stretch the floor. I believe that is a situation that you can end up succeeding with, but I don't know if Carolina is ultimately going to want to do that. So that's where to me, this is the most complex one. My gut says, yes, you want him back. But when you really think through it, I just have no idea. I think I need to see what some other guys do.
Yeah, I think it's important to remember that when Van Allen Lubin came in this past offseason, I think he arrived with the expectation to be a guy that came off the bench and be a role player and impact the game that way. If that was the case this past season, I don't know if it's communicated very upfront to him. What's the issue if we secure your NIL money? If you're a guy that comes off the bench but still plays 20-plus minutes a night, Carolina's got to take a look at playing with 2 bigs. It's not just Florida who does it, and they're in the Sweet 16. Michigan does it. Auburn does it. Mm-hmm. Michigan State does it. So you're talking about a fourth of the team still playing basketball in this modern era where it's all about floor spacing, creating driving lanes for the rim, but really you want to be perimeter oriented. 4 teams at least play with 2 bigs for an extended period of time and have had success doing it. This is something where I want Hubert Davis to be challenged on, get the most out of our personnel. Because, I think, and not that I thought Jalen Withers was the answer at the 4, but right before Carolina made the lineup switch, we were on the verge of talking about, do you try Lubin and Jalen Washington together? They went the Jalen Withers route, Lubin at the 5, and it ultimately worked out better for them. But that was a conversation that was going to be worth having. And so I hear you. I do think it helps that Caleb Wilson is an interchangeable wing player, a guy that can play multiple positions. If Drake Powell comes back, I think you were able to figure out down the back half of the season where he best fits. At that 3 spot, as opposed to trying to be that stretch 4 that he just doesn't have the shooting right now to be. So, but I think this is going to be another guy, mainly because one of the bigs we're going to talk about, I don't think it's going to be back. Carolina is going to be, I think, pretty. What's the word I'm looking for here? They're going to be very proactive about retaining Van Allen Lubin. Just because you need some production back from the inside. I love James Brown's ability. I think there's talent there. there's definitely, I think there's an edge with him. But I don't know if next year he's going to be ready to impact the game. You've got the whole Zayden High thing that hopefully we get some clarity about that sometime in the near future, because his potential status could really impact a lot of these discussions we're sitting here having tonight. But we know no matter what, man, Carolina's going big game hunting to find a big man. I would just like to see a situation where it does involve Ben Allen Lubin being back on the roster. And right now, that's my expectation. I do think that when this roster comes together and they're meeting for practices in the summer, I do think Ben Allen Lubin will be back in Chapel Hill. Now let's get to the two freshmen that I think, when we enter the season, when Carolina, we were talking so much about ACC regular season title, Final Fours. We've said that if those things happen, Ian Jackson, Drake Powell, more than likely going to be one and dones and would be off to the NBA. There's a greater chance that it's Drake Powell that's the one and done. We'll start with Ian Jackson first, a guy that just had an up and down first season in Chapel Hill, played in 36 games, was Carolina's second leading scorer at 11.9 points per game, averaged 2.7 rebounds, just under 1 assist, shot 46% from the field, 40% from three, had the stretch back in January with I think it was 5 20-point games in a 6-game stretch in conference play, was emerging as Carolina's best offensive weapon. But as, RJ Davis came out of a shooting slump, kind of did revert to being the number 2 option, was in and out of the starting lineup, but was on the bench, came off the bench during the stretch at the end of the season when Carolina made its run to secure a berth in the tournament, and was really up and down. There were games where you saw the Ian Jackson that was a starter that scored 20 points in 5 games. Then you saw the guy that kind of got forced to go to the bench because of the way he acted on the court in the blowout loss at Clemson, where he was basically pouting on the court for all intents and purposes, just not happy with his role at the moment. I think tonight, as we sit here recording, there's a better chance that he transfers and plays college basketball elsewhere than he either goes pro or B returns to Carolina. His stock, I think, really took a dip the back half of the year because his shot selection, his decision making, he's not ready for the next level. I don't know if his body is ready for the next level. And I think he was a guy that, quite frankly, when, Trimble or, RJ Davis would voice their frustration and concerns about lack of fight or whatever, I think he was the guy that was talked about as much as anybody on the roster, right up there with Elliot Cadeau. Where do you think Ian Jackson's future at Carolina stands as we sit here on the first night with the transfer portal officially open?
Yeah, it is pretty tough because to me, I think he's going to be playing for Rick Pitino and St. John's next year. I don't see any way possible that he is back with Carolina because I think that we've seen, and you could say with Seth Trimble, well, he came back after losing his minutes at the end of last year. Elliot Cadeau came back after losing his minutes at the end of last year. Both of those guys did, but I think it was a much different situation. This group is going to look very similar, and I think Carolina, as we've mentioned, they have to make changes somewhere, and that backcourt is going to get some sort of boost from someone that simply can shoot the ball better than the guys that were in it this year. I think that he's a guy that seems to me like, because of the way that, as you put it, he pouted on the court, really just the body language as a whole. To me, that's the body language of a guy that's not going to be here. And so I think that he was expecting that he was going to come in here and be the guy. He was going to eventually take over that spot from RJ Davis. And for a while, at the start of conference play, it looked like things were starting to go to plan for him. But as the season went along and he sort of lost that touch, went through, the types of things that you see most freshmen do, I think that kind of threw him through a loop. And he was a guy that, became almost unplayable because he was trying to force things way too much on the offensive end of the floor, really just, running it up opponents' backsides when, it was like him by himself running against 3 or 4 guys who were back defensively, leading to mistakes, turnovers, bad shots. And then defensively, he just didn't really give you a whole lot on that end of the floor. So I would be kind of stunned if he's back. I think there is a chance that he goes to the NBA. We saw, last year, a guy like Harrison Ingram go that had basically second-round stock. I think that's probably what they're going to tell Ian Jackson this season. I think you're going to have similar grades for him. I think there'll be some people that will say, hey, with what you showed in the early portion of the year, you could be a first-round pick because teams will want to take a chance on upside. Ultimately, I think he's probably a second-round pick. But hell, he might want to get out of college that badly. I have no idea, what his thinking is on that. But I think regardless, it's hard to see him being back in Chapel Hill because of the fact that they sort of weaned him out of the starting lineup or out of the rotation, rather, as the season went along.
Yeah, he said after the loss on Friday that his status is up in the air. So it kind of tells you that this is something that's already probably been in the works if he's leaving. I do think this is where the re-recruiting of your roster is exhausting for coaches. But the benefit is that whenever you had your end of season meeting with them, and those I think started either last night or today, there is not going to be an RJ Davis on this roster next year. As painful it is to say and admit, which opens up that channel for him to be the number one scoring option. But how much does Hubert Davis want to put up with the attitude? And that's just frankly what it is. And, that's just I don't mean to knock Ian because I think he's a good kid, but guys that play the game his way, that's the way that they are wired. When they're hooping, when they're scoring, when the ball's going through the bottom of the net, everything's fine in the world. But when you don't score the ball, how are you going to impact winning? Are you going to get down in a stance, or are you going to guard? Are you going to make sure that you communicate defensively so your guy's not blindsided by that screen, or you're making sure you're rotating? Are you going to compete on the glass? Are you going to try to do all the other little things that the game requires and demands when the ball's not going in the basket? That answer was no this year. And maybe that's a growing thing. Maybe that's a maturity thing. But if you're this 5-star prospect that's going to the NBA, then that stuff should have come natural because the NBA is going to ask the same thing out of you. And so, I'll say this. When I wrote the article last night, I thought he'd be back. And I thought that this would be a guy that Carolina would value back because his talent is so high. And you could really use a guy that can put the ball in the basket the way that he can do it. But, just kind of sitting here, reading the room, getting some more intel now that the season is officially over, I don't think he'll be back in Chapel Hill. And I think, we'll miss his scoring ability. I think, he was a fan favorite with the way that he could play the game. He had cool hair, could throw down some monster dunks, but this might be one where losing the talent is better for your culture and is better for your locker room. And so I don't think Ian Jackson will be back with Carolina when the season tips off next October. Let's talk about the other McDonald's All-American that was on the roster this past season, Drake Powell, a guy that also endured an up and down freshman season with the program. He played in 37 games, averaged 7.4 points, 3.4 rebounds, 1.1 assists. Did so while shooting 48% from the field, and he did shoot 38% from behind the three-point line. So those shooting numbers, I think, a lot better than you probably felt like they were when you saw him go ISO mode for about 3 straight minutes in the Ole Miss game earlier last week. But this is a guy that when Carolina went to Maui, man, you saw his potential. You saw what he could be. And he got forced into the starting lineup, but was playing out of position for the majority of the time, was being that stretch four guy that, quite frankly, maybe he could grow into that role, but was not ready to be that guy this past in his freshman season. But, once Hubert Davis found the five that worked, it was with Drake Powell as the three-man, was a great connector for Carolina, a great defender, and a guy that was a willing rebounder. He has the highest draft stock of anybody right now on the roster, but this was a guy that grew up 30 minutes outside of Chapel Hill, grew up wanting to be a Tar Heel, probably did not like the way the season went, going 23-14 and being sent home after the first round of the tournament. Where do you stand with Drake Powell and his future with the Heels?
I think everybody should be wanting him back. I think, to me, this is probably priority number one. Just, what he was able to show you as the season went along, how good of a defender he was, developed as a shooter. I think his offensive game is coming around. And yeah, I mean, do you want him seeking out his offense at times, going ISO, like you said in the game against Ole Miss? Not right now. I think maybe eventually he can get to that point and become that three-level scorer that Carolina needs him to be, but I don't think he's there quite yet. But in terms of just the athletic profile, fits it perfectly. Exactly what Carolina needs. Runs the floor tremendously on both ends, and I think that's ultimately what Carolina wants. A guy that I could see growing into more of a vocal leader as things move along. I think this year, a little bit hesitant to be that vocal guy because he, was new to the team. He was new to the starting rotation as the season went along. I think it was hard for him to feel like, okay, I need to be someone who steps in here and takes a leadership role. I think this coming year, you would see that from him. And so I want him back. Personally, I think if he chooses to come back, that's amazing. But if he makes the choice that he wants to go to the NBA, I get it. If you're seen as a first rounder, and I hope that this is a guy that is being mocked in the first round, that is going to be told that he is going to be a first-round pick, that is actually a first-round pick. Because we heard the same thing with Harrison Ingram, and it turned out to be wrong. And Harrison Ingram, I mean, he just recently, on a game that I did for back in the studio for the Hornets, that was his first basket was against the Hornets that late in the season. One of the first times that he was actually active for a game. So I'm really hoping that Drake Powell gets the right sort of information when it comes to the NBA draft. But yeah, from a Carolina perspective, you should be dying to have this dude back because he would be a great piece on the wing for you. He would be arguably the team's best defender, depending on what happens with Seth Trimble. Could be clearly the team's best defender. And I do think that there is ways to go for him on the offensive end of the floor that could make him a pretty special player at Carolina if he was to stick around.
Yeah, if Seth Trimble's 1A on your wish list, I think Drake Powell to me is 1B. I think what you really got to hope more than anything, because the NBA loves him. He's what the NBA wants. He's got an NBA body. He's got an NBA skill set where he could be a 3-and-D guy. Could guard the 2 through 4 positions if he had to, rebounder, all that fun stuff. You got to hope that mainly he's fueled by this season being as quote unquote bad as it was, and he wants to come back and be a part of a winning team and leave a legacy that was a lot more memorable than what this past year's team was, which not a whole lot really to brag about. I think Carolina is going to value him. I think this is where having a guy like Jim Tanner, who has so much experience, working with the NBA contracts, depending on how much Carolina has NIL money, maybe he could put together an NBA-style contract to keep him at Carolina and retain him for at least one more season. And so, this is a guy that I would get frustrated with his shot selection at times. There was not a shot I feel like he did not like that he took. But that kind of got masked by his ability to defend and his willingness to rebound. and do the other things and do the little things on the defensive end of the floor that help this team, down the second half of the season. So I want him back. And I would say that unless he goes pro, I think he's back. I don't see this guy excuse me. I don't see this guy transferring and going and playing anywhere else, at least at the college level. A few more guys for us to get through here. We're making our way through Carolina's roster, playing a game of, will they stay or will they go? We do want to appreciate all you that are hanging out with us here live late on a Monday night, whether you're on the Heel Tough Blog Facebook page, the Heel Tough Blog YouTube channel, or at my personal Twitter page at HTB_Josh. If you're on my Twitter account, go ahead and give me a follow if you haven't already done so. Next up is Jalen Washington. The guy that I pretty much said this year was the cardinal sin for why the season went the way that it went. And we should have known with the way that Carolina threw itself at every big man in the portal last offseason. It was worse than a drunk guy on Tinder on a Friday night. Any big man that entered the portal, Carolina was going after him. That should have been the first sign that they knew that Jalen Washington was not ready to be that guy, and he simply wasn't. Played in 36 games, played almost 16 minutes, averaged 5.7 points, 4.2 rebounds, 0.5 assists, did shoot 59% from the field, 28% from three. When you have guys in your program for 3 years, they should be more ready to impact winning than Jalen Washington was. And to me, this is twofold. I think, A, it's why fans like myself, if Carolina wants to make changes with its coaching staff, i.e. Sean May, and bring in a better big man coach, will not hear me complain. I think Sean May is a good man. I will forever thank him for 2005. I don't think he's coaching big men the way that we need our big men to be coached in Chapel Hill. So part of it, I think, is on the coaching staff. But part of it, too, is player. Like, if you want to be great, you're going to put in the work to become great. If you want to become the best player possible, you're going to do whatever it's going to take. And I don't want to say that he's lazy, but I'll say this: he was soft. And you can't have a soft guy playing your five at Carolina. You just can't. Not when you play the non-conference schedule that you play, not when you play in the ACC. Even though the ACC was quote-unquote down again this year. For me, the nail in the coffin was Friday. Malik Dia is a nice big man. Solid big man. There were 2 times he literally pushed Jalen Washington out of the way and laid or ducked the ball into the basket. It was borderline like bullying on a basketball court with what Malik Dia did to Jalen Washington. And so, look, sweet kid. I think you give Carolina credit because how many schools would have stayed committed to him when he suffered the knee injury that he suffered in high school? And I don't think he's ever been back to the form he was before that knee injury. I don't got any much more to say. I don't think that he'll be back at Chapel Hill. And quite frankly, I don't want him back.
Yeah, I don't think there's many people that are going to want him back. I just don't think it's a fit right now. I think he's a guy that maybe going back closer to home ends up working out for him. Just going to a lower level of basketball maybe works out for him. He showed you exactly what he is on Friday when he got pushed back multiple times by Malik Dia. Despite having the height advantage, couldn't out-rebound him. And that's a big part of the reason why Carolina ends up losing that game. It's not what Carolina needs right now. And it sucks because I think that you brought up the thing that I think honestly has held him back the most. He has not been the same since he suffered the knee injury in high school. If he doesn't suffer that knee injury, we're probably looking at a different player. But from that moment, things have not really seemed to be the same. And, there was a moment earlier in the year where he ends up, looks like potentially hurts his leg again. I believe that was the Boston College game where he goes out. So who knows? Maybe that was part of it towards the end of the season. I have no idea. But Carolina needs to redo the front court. They're going to need to take as many shots there as possible. And I just don't think that he is one of the guys that is going to be sticking around through that. I think he wants to go to a place where he can play. And I think for Carolina, the ultimate goal would be to recruit enough where he wouldn't have to play that much. Where if you're getting a starter and Lubin staying at the 5, then those are your 2 big men. Jalen Washington is the guy that comes in when they need blue squad members, when they need a guy like Tyjon Claude. If there's an injury or something like that, he's the guy that ends up stepping up. I don't think they envision him as part of what they're doing moving forward. And so for that reason, I think you're probably better off with him leaving, going somewhere where he can potentially play. And hey, if he ends up having success wherever he goes, at a lower level or whatever, then that's fine. I think that's something that you should root for if you're a Tar Heel fan. But I just don't think it's going to work out in Chapel Hill.
Yeah, no, I don't think it is either. And this is a guy that, I think it's important to get this message across, man. We root for these guys even when they leave the program. Like, I'm not one of these fans, and I hope we're getting better as fans in this new reality. Guys are going to leave every single year, and I'm still going to support them, root for them to have success.
Well, unless they go like State or Duke. If they go there, you're done. We ain't rooting for you.
That
is Styles. Like
that didn't have to be stated. I didn't think so. And I know that I've been very critical of Jalen Washington, but I mean, that's my job. Like, I'd be doing a disservice if I wasn't criticizing a guy that just that wasn't the player we needed him to be. And I believed in his talent. I thought he was going to be fantastic. I thought he was going to open up a whole nother level of Carolina's offense, being able to run some 5-out stuff. That just was not meant to be. So, but yeah, I don't think I think he's an ACC caliber big. He's not a North Carolina caliber big, and there's a difference. And we need to get back to having North Carolina caliber bigs in our front court. 2 more players to go. The next guy is another guy that I don't expect back in Chapel Hill. That's Cade Tyson. Just never had the season he expected to have. He was the prize of Carolina's transfer portal haul a year ago. Never lived up to the hype. Played in 31 games this past year, averaged under 8 minutes per contest, 2.6 points, 1.1 rebounds, 0.1 assists, while shooting 40% from the field and just 29% from 3, and had the ridiculous stat that it was deep into ACC play, where he only made like 1 field goal against power conference competition. And then he had, a ring of success where the light bulb was starting to go off, but he was evidence of, anyone individually, of a guy that was beating up on bad opponents. Like when he had his run against, was it State, Virginia, Miami? It was a guy that was just, okay, you're playing against guys that are at your talent level, which means they're not at ACC caliber players. There was a point in time where I was open to wanting him to come back because, even for as bad as Justin Pierce was and as bad as Christian Keeling was during their lone year where they transferred up from the mid-major level, by the end of the year, they looked like they could play at the ACC level if they had another season. I don't feel that same way about Cade Tyson. I don't. I think he'll do it'd be a much better service for him to go back down to the mid-major level and play at that speed of the game, that physicality. I don't think he's a guy I don't think he could go to Clemson where his brother played and become a difference maker. And so this was the guy we were uber excited about. I think if he would have been the guy that Carolina expected him to be, this season goes completely different. That was not the case. And with that being said, I don't expect him to be back in Chapel Hill for the upcoming season.
No, there is absolute there. This is the guy I feel the most confident about Because Jalen Washington, just because of the size, I could see if there is a thought in their mind of, man, maybe we want to bring him back, see if we add more to his frame, if he becomes a better player, whatever. That I know that would not make a whole lot of sense because we did that this year. With this dude, unless he finds his shooting stroke and all of a sudden gets back to the player that he was at Belmont, what's the value? There wasn't much value to him to begin with. He showed that he could drive and score the ball at Belmont. He could not do that at Carolina, or he at least never attempted to do that at Carolina. He was a spot-up shooter who simply could not knock down shots. And if that is going to be the player that you're going to be, you're either going to hit shots or you ain't playing. So I don't see how you can have the confidence that all of a sudden he's going to find it. He never found it during the season, even when he was getting more run. You thought, okay, eventually he's going to settle into some sort of rhythm, right? And he's going to find a way to knock down a few threes, and we're going to be saying to ourselves, man, there is some potential here. That never happened. I would disagree with you on Justin Pierce. I thought Christian Keeling, if he got a second year, would have been a better player. Justin Pierce, I think, was probably a guy that was better fit for the mid-major level. Cade Tyson is the perfect fit for that. Dude, you're from the same area as we are. There's a local team around here that needs a lot of help shooting the basketball. They just lost their top player to the portal. Charlotte is calling you. Go ahead, take the call, and go home. That's what makes the most sense to me, because I just don't see a guy that is a power conference player, even though, and this is the thing that I want to make clear, when Carolina made the pickup, there is a legitimate reason you were excited about this guy, because he came, yes, from the mid-major level, but Belmont is a pretty good school. We've seen that for years, that they had a lot of success. Now, that was when they were in the Ohio Valley. Now that they've moved conferences, not nearly as successful. But this dude shot 46% from three. You don't do that on accident. I don't know why it just never clicked here, but I just don't think that another year being in Chapel Hill, all of a sudden things are going to get better. I think it's going to be a new destination.
Yeah, no, I definitely agree with that. If maybe he would have finished the season a lot stronger, maybe you run it back a full off season in the system, what have you. There's when Carolina was back to playing the big opponents, he was basically put in to steal a minute or two for whatever guy was in foul trouble or just needed a second to catch their breath. So I think, Cade Tyson at Charlotte could be fun. It'd be a fun local story for us to follow. It'd be easy for us to keep up with his career, but I just don't see this thing moving forward at Carolina. Last player we'll talk about is James Brown. He was the last freshman on the roster this past season. And James Brown, I think did some things that you could see the potential. He played in 18 games, played just under 3 minutes, averaged 1.2 points, 0.8 rebounds. In his limited time, he shot 71% from the field. This is a guy that, when Carolina was searching for its big man, a lot of people were clamoring to see more of him. Simply put, guys, his body was not ready to play the type of minutes that y'all were asking him to play at that time. This was a guy that was at one point a borderline, top 100 prospect. He finished strong coming out of high school, but I think he knew, even though Carolina didn't recruit a big man the way they wanted to in the portal, this year was all about getting acclimated to college, getting in the weight room, and getting his body ready to, I think, be a role player this year, and then maybe by his junior year, be a guy that could maybe be a starting big man at a place like UNC. I think you got to love his energy. He always made something happen when he was on the court. And I think the biggest thing you got to like is there was not a better teammate that was on the bench than James Brown. No one enjoyed seeing his teammates succeed more than he did. A guy in a locker room, whenever we'd get the behind-the-scene footage, that was a guy like when RJ would have a milestone moment. It was James Brown there that was as much as anybody in the locker room, so cheering him on. If they had a big win, it was James Brown kind of being emotional and being very upbeat about that. And I think that stuff matters. I think that's another good culture guy. Kind of what you would link in what Joel James was for those teams for the Carolina in the 2010s. Perfect. Was he the best basketball player? No, but he played his butt off, and he was a great culture guy, and that stuff matters now more than ever. So I could be surprised if he transfers. Like, I think it would shock me. I think, this is a guy that Hubert Davis, when he would get asked about, would talk about glowingly. And I think this is a guy that, even though Carolina is going to recruit a big man or two in the portal, I think they value him moving forward. And so I want him back. I expect him back because I think he could be a fun part of this program in the years to come.
I mean, he's the only young big that you've got in the program. And so you want to be able to keep him around and at least give him a shot to develop. I mean, Chad Cannon down here says that he's just a younger version of Washington. Well, first of all, Washington is much bigger than him. So it would make sense that he, would get pushed around at times, especially this year. Like, if that's what you're judging it off of, I mean, he was a dude that was, 6'9". I think he might be 6'10" on a good day. And he was incredibly lean. We knew this about him coming out. We told people when Carolina landed him, and all of a sudden people were starting to say, oh my God, this is a guy that, he's a big, Carolina really needs one. Is he going to be able to come in here and play? We told you last offseason, it's going to take him a lot of time to be the guy that you want him to be. He could get there. I think there is talent there, but I think the thing that you like the most about him is the motor. I mean, this kid is going to give it his all every time that he is out on the court. And that's really what you ask for from a guy that is a little bit smaller, is that they're scrappy. And the thing that I like about him, you said, teammate guy, culture guy. I mean, hell, dude, Theo Pinson made a career of that in the NBA. I mean, he is a beloved Knick because he was literally just a part of a bench of a team that made the playoffs, and people loved him for it. Those guys mean something. When you have guys that are positive, that bring energy on the bench, you like those types of guys. And I also think there's a skill set there. I think that he's a guy that, it maybe isn't going to be a dominant scorer, but I think you can get a low post touch to him. And I think eventually he will be able to give you a bucket. So to me, I think it's worth keeping him around, seeing what he can end up becoming. And I think he's going to be open to staying. I would be kind of shocked if he is a guy that ends up leaving. So I would love to keep him around, but we'll see ultimately what happens. I know that Carolina's going to jumble this roster up a lot. And if he feels like, there's an opportunity for him to go play significant minutes and start, especially if that presents itself, then no one can really blame him if he ends up actually walking away.
Yeah, exactly. I don't think that opportunity is going to present itself, but if it does, James Brown, go do your thing. I'd love to have him back because I do think he could be a big man. He could be the big man of the future that this program could build around, in 2026, 2027. All right, really quickly because we're running long and I know it's really late, but we've hinted at it. We've talked about it. So we'll get to it right now. Obviously, the transfer portal is open. We said that at the beginning of the show. That's why we're doing this podcast for you here tonight. Over 700 players have entered the portal, including a pretty important one. Isaac McNeely from Virginia entered the portal. That was early this morning. I mean, I was on the air at WFNZ when he put his name in the portal. Tar Heel Illustrated, Andrew Jones, David Sissy do a great job covering Carolina basketball. They reported and confirmed that Carolina has made contact with him. And that's a pretty significant thing because he's in the portal, but he has a no contact tag with them. So the fact that Carolina has already been involved with him, I think is, it's the positive side to being home as early as you are. And it shows you that Carolina's done its homework and they're ready to go. You're talking about a 6'4" guard that averaged over 14 points per game this past year, shot over 42% from behind the three-point line. He has size, has the ability to score it in a multitude of different ways, i.e. from the perimeter. Did not have the best game against Carolina when they played back in the regular season. When Carolina won by 15 in Chapel Hill, he was 5 of 12 from the field, 2 of 7 from three. He did score 17 points. So just really quickly, don't want to run too long on this, but what do you make about Carolina on day one of the portal already being active and involved with arguably the best guard that's in the portal right now?
Love it. I think it's exactly what you want to see from this staff. Is we need guys on this team that are going to turn this around and help this group be better immediately. Isaac McNeely, I think, is a guy that can do that. Now, one thing that was pointed out is that he might have been the worst defensive player on that Virginia team this past year. But here's the thing. You're not really bringing him here to be a great defender. I think Carolina is hoping that other guys on the roster are going to be able to bring that. You're bringing him here to shoot the rock and knock down shots. And Carolina sorely needs that. You've seen that, yes, there are teams that are big that are still playing in March, but also there are teams that have really good shooting, and that's a big part of the reason why they are playing deep in March. So you need that balance, and I think that's what Carolina is hoping to do this offseason. I love it. I think the fact that he led the ACC in three-point shooting can't be taken lightly. And again, I know that that's not a guarantee, but here's the thing about him. He has shot the ball at a 39% clip from the outside or better in each of the 3 years that he has been at the college level. So that is where he shines. I mean, he is a specialist in that area. He averages at least 6.8 attempts per game from beyond the arc for the 3 seasons that he's been there. So he is a guy that's uber aggressive in that area of the game, can score it at multiple levels, though. He's shown that ability. And the thing that I like from him is he's not just a catch and shoot type of guy. He can create his own shot. And that's something that I think is important because, yes, you do want those catch and shoot guys. But as we said, that's what Cade Tyson was. And when it didn't work out, when he was unable to knock down those shots, his game was pretty much non-existent. This is a guy that I think can do a little bit more, can create his own shot, can share the ball a little bit better, averaged 3.3 assists this past year. I really think that he would be a great fit at Carolina, but it appears that it's them and Louisville, so Carolina's got their work cut out for them.
Yeah, no, this isn't, I mean, impressive is maybe too strong of a word. This is what I think we wanted to see was how is this going to work with the front office, Jim Tanner. We know he's hired. There's not been any other official hires that have been announced by the Carolina basketball office, but how is this going to work? Is it Hubert going to find the players that he wants and Jim Tanner doing, the contract thing, or are they going to help evaluate, find talent, be in contact with the players? I think it's going to be a mix of both, a blend of both. It's going to require top tier communication, but it sucks being home from the tournament. But now that you're home from the tournament, you have no excuses. You've got to be active in the portal. And so they have the work cut out for them. Louisville is going to have arguably as good an NIL situation as any program in the country. It's up to as much as $10 million is going to be committed in terms of NIL funds for them this upcoming offseason. So this is a guy that Carolina, I believe, recruited pretty heavily coming out of high school. Hopefully those relationships are still intact. Hopefully you can sell them on a vision. Obviously you pay him the compensation that you want, but this would be a really big first step in the right direction for Hubert Davis as he tries to overhaul this roster for the upcoming season. And of course, as we get any more news and developments, we'll have you covered right here on the podcast. But more importantly, we'll have you covered on the website, which is where we're going to turn your attention now as we wind down this edition of the podcast. The website's about to be basically in full mode or in full go mode with the offseason here. The article that I wrote last night, you can go check that out where I went player by player, wrote about their situation, made my prediction if I think they'll stay within the program or if they'll transfer. You can go and check that out. There is an article up about Carolina contacting Isaac McNeely as well. So that coverage can be found there. And any news or any player information that comes out, if Carolina contacts a player, once it is confirmed by a legitimate source, we will have that coverage for you on our website. So make sure you go there for the latest offseason coverage for basketball. Tar Heel football held their pro day today for all the guys looking to get drafted in the upcoming NFL draft. Spring practice still underway in Chapel Hill as well. So make sure you get to the website there for the latest on Bill Belichick's football program. As for the podcast, you guys know where to find us. Every major podcasting platform. Simply search the Four Corners Podcast and we will pop up. There, we encourage you guys to rate, review, and subscribe. That way you don't miss any editions of the show throughout the basketball off season. With that, guys, it is going to wrap up this edition of the show. I do want to thank Anthony once again for hosting with me. We want to thank you guys for watching and listening. And as always, go Tar Heels.